Officially, Tri-Eye Atlas is the third confirmed interstellar object in human history, a cold wanderer from another star system discovered on July 1, 2025, by the Atlas Alert System in Hawaii. An ordinary comet, a harmless traveler, just another tick in the catalog of astronomical discoveries. But in August 2025, 5 weeks after the discovery of Tri-Eye Atlas, a mention of an object codenamed 4I appeared in the closed communication channels of NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. An object moving in parallel, at the same speed, like an escort, like a guard, or something even more alarming. The documents leaked a month later. Anonymous source, encrypted files. Amateur astronomers began checking telescope archives looking for confirmation. NASA is silent. The European Space Agency refuses to comment. Observatories around the world have received classified directives. But the data does not disappear. The numbers do not lie. And if these documents are real, then we are not just observing random wanderers from interstellar space. We are observing something coordinated. 2 objects, 1 trajectory, synchronized movement across billions of kilometers of cosmic darkness. The probability of a random coincidence is astronomically small, so small that it is easier to dismiss than to explain. And the question that burns in the minds of everyone who has seen these numbers is simple and terrifying. If they are moving together, who sent them? Stay tuned until the end, because we'll break down all the leaked data, analyze the trajectories of both objects, and discuss why NASA might be hiding the most important discovery in human history. And if this mystery has you hooked like it has me, be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single update as events unfold. Write in the comments where you are watching from, what time it is there, and what you think about this classified discovery. And if you want to help the community grow, share this video on X, Facebook, Reddit, or just in your group chats. You are the reason we can continue to seek out stories like this. So thank you for your support. Let's start with what we know officially. On July 1st, 2025, at 0034 UTC, the Atlas Automated Observation System detected a faint object moving through the constellation Aquarius. It had a brightness of magnitude 16, barely visible even to powerful telescopes. The object was given the temporary designation A25EL27. Within 48 hours, astronomers confirmed that its orbit was hyperbolic. Its eccentricity was greater than 1. The object was not gravitationally bound to the Sun. It came from interstellar space, the third in 8 years. After Oumuamua in 2017 and Borisov in 2019, astronomers already knew the procedure: observations, spectral analysis, determination of trajectory, confirmation of interstellar origin. On July 14th, the object was officially named 3A/2025 L27 Atlas, abbreviated as 3A Atlas, the third interstellar, the third visitor from the darkness between the stars. Speed of entry into the solar system, 58.6 kilometers per second relative to the Sun. For context, that's more than 200,000 kilometers per hour, faster than any spacecraft ever created by humankind. The trajectory indicated an origin from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. Deep space, a region where stars are separated by light years of emptiness. Preliminary calculations showed that the object would pass perihelion, the closest point to the Sun, on January 16, 2026, at a distance of 2.83 astronomical units. Closer than Mars, but farther than Earth. Safe, predictable, of scientific interest, but no cause for panic. Astronomers went about their usual work. Telescopes around the world began tracking the object. The Gemini Observatory in Hawaii, the Very Large Telescope of the European Southern Observatory in Chile, the Hubble Space Telescope allocated observation time. Spectroscopy showed signs of water ice and carbon-containing compounds. A typical comet, nothing unusual. By August, 3I Atlas had become routine. Just another object in the databases, another publication for scientific journals. The world kept turning, but something had changed in the closed channels. On September 23, 2025, a message appeared on an amateur astronomy forum. Anonymous user. A new account, created minutes before publication. One message, which he posted, and never appeared online again. Username, JPL_Insider25. The message contained a link to an encrypted file hosted on an anonymous server. The encryption key was included. File name, 4A classification internal JPL, August 2025.pdf. JPL, NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, one of the world's leading centers for tracking asteroids and comets. The center that maintains a database of near-Earth objects. The center that is the first to calculate the orbits of potentially dangerous asteroids. If anyone knows about every object moving through the solar system, it's them. Within hours, hundreds of people had downloaded the file. The forum exploded. Amateur astronomers, professional researchers, journalists, casual observers. Inside was an 18-page PDF document. Technical data, orbital elements, photometric measurements, spectral analysis, timestamps of observations from several telescopes, graphs, tables, calculations, and an object that did not officially exist. Designation: 4, A/2025 Q41, fourth interstellar object. Date of first discovery: August 19, 2025. Telescope: Palomar Observatory, California. Automated System for Searching for Near-Earth Objects, ZTF, Zwicky Transient Facility. Brightness: 17th magnitude, even fainter than 3A Atlas. So dim that only robotic survey telescopes could detect it. The orbital elements made readers freeze. Eccentricity: 1.09. Hyperbolic orbit. Interstellar origin confirmed. But that was to be expected. If the document is genuine, the fourth interstellar object is big news, but not shocking. After Oumuamua, Borisov, and 3A Atlas, astronomers began to accept the idea that interstellar visitors are more common than previously thought. Perhaps several pass through the outer solar system unnoticed each year. The fourth object is statistics. It's science. What wasn't science was the angle of the orbit to the ecliptic, 87.3 degrees, almost perpendicular to the plane of the planets, an almost vertical dive through the solar system. Unusual, but not impossible. Interstellar objects can arrive at any angle. Their trajectories are not limited to the plane of the planets because they did not form in our system. Entry speed: 59.1 kilometers per second relative to the Sun, almost identical to 3A Atlas. Coincidence? Maybe. Interstellar objects originating from the same region of the galaxy may have similar speeds. The galaxy rotates. Stars in the vicinity of the Sun move at certain speeds relative to the center of the galaxy. If two objects flew out of nearby star systems, their speeds may be similar. Statistically unlikely, but not impossible. But the next figure put an end to all talk of coincidences. The angular distance on the celestial sphere between 3I Atlas and 4I at the time of the latter's discovery: 11 degrees 23 minutes. That's close. Very close for objects that have flown in from interstellar space. Imagine that. The night sky covers 41,253 square degrees, the entire celestial sphere around Earth, and two interstellar objects, arriving independently from infinity, are 11 degrees apart. For comparison, the full moon covers about half a degree. 11 degrees is 22 lunar diameters. Sounds like a lot? It's nothing on the scale of the sky. But what made hearts beat faster was the relative speed between the objects, the difference in their vectors of motion. If you take the speed of 3A Atlas and subtract the speed of 4A, you get a number that shouldn't be so small. 2.8 kilometers per second, 2 kilometers per second, less than 3. On a cosmic scale, that's almost zero. It's less than the difference in speed between Earth and Venus in their orbits around the Sun. Two objects that came from interstellar space, where distances are measured in light years, are moving almost in sync, as if they were connected, as if they were a pair, as if they were flying in formation. One amateur astronomer wrote on a forum, "It's as if two planes, flying from different cities on different continents without coordinating their routes, met in the air over the ocean and flew side by side with a speed difference of several kilometers per hour." Possible? Theoretically. Probable? No. The document contained more. The spectral data from 4A showed a composition similar to 3I Atlas. Water ice, carbon-containing compounds, silicates, a typical comet, or what looks like a typical comet. Its size was estimated at 350 to 400 meters in diameter, slightly smaller than 3A Atlas, which was estimated at 500 meters. Both objects are dark, low albedo. They reflect almost no light. This is normal for comets covered with a layer of organic compounds, darkened by millions of years of cosmic ray exposure. The orbit graph showed the trajectory of 4I, entry into the solar system from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius, almost the same region of the sky from which 3I Atlas came. The perihelion, the closest point to the Sun, was predicted for January 28, 2026, 12 days after the perihelion of 3A Atlas. Distance at perihelion, 2.91 astronomical units, practically identical to 3A Atlas. Two objects, almost identical speeds, almost identical perigee dates, almost identical distances, similar composition, same direction of arrival. The forum exploded with speculation. Someone offered a natural explanation. Both objects are fragments of a single parent comet that broke apart millions of years ago in interstellar space. Possibly. It happens. Comets can break apart. But then, why were they discovered 6 weeks apart? Why not at the same time? And if they broke apart long ago, their trajectories should have diverged more than the data shows. Someone suggested that both objects originated from the same star system, ejected into interstellar space by some catastrophic event. A collision of planets, the close passage of a massive star, a supernova explosion. That would explain the similar speeds and direction. But again, there is a time gap in their detection. Why didn't they arrive at the same time? And someone, there's always someone, suggested that they weren't random, that the synchronicity wasn't natural, that the two objects were following a coordinated path, that someone was guiding them. The idea hung in the forum. No one wanted to be the first to say the word. Aliens, probes, technology. But the idea was there, in every post, in every calculation, in every attempt to explain the numbers with natural processes. Because the math didn't work. The probability that two interstellar objects would accidentally arrive in the solar system 6 weeks apart, at similar speeds, from the same region of the sky, on nearly identical trajectories, is, well, no one knows for sure. But astronomers tried to calculate it. One researcher on a forum provided a calculation. If interstellar objects the size of Triatlas pass through the inner solar system about once a year, and that's an optimistic estimate, then the probability that two of them will arrive within 2 months of each other is about 1 in 100. Not impossible. But the probability that they will move synchronously with a relative speed of less than 3 kilometers per second? 1 in 10,000? Maybe 1 in 100,000? Maybe worse? And the probability that this will happen and NASA will classify the data? Here, mathematics becomes philosophy. Because the document was classified. Every page had a watermark. Internal use only JPL Asteroid Dynamics Group. For internal use only. Jet Propulsion Laboratory Asteroid Dynamics Group. This is not a public document. This is not a press release. This is an internal report that was not supposed to leave NASA, and it was leaked. Who? Why? No one knows. User JPL_Insider25 disappeared. The account was deleted within 24 hours of publication, but the file remained. Copies spread across the internet. Downloads, re-uploads, mirrors. Attempts to remove it from hosting sites failed. Too late. Too many people had seen it. Professional astronomers began checking the data. Could the existence of 4A be confirmed independently? If the object was indeed discovered on August 19th and is moving along the specified trajectory, it can be found. Telescopes can be pointed at it. The archives can be checked. The Zwicky Transient Facility is a public survey telescope. Its data is available to astronomers. If 4A is there, someone will find it. And they started looking. On September 27th, 4 days after the leak, an amateur astronomer in Australia reported that he had found the object in the ZTF archive data. The position matched the prediction from the leak. The brightness was magnitude 17. The movement was confirmed in several frames. The object is real. It is there. On September 28th, an astronomer in Italy confirmed it. He used data from another survey telescope, Pan-STARRS in Hawaii. The object was recorded on August 21st, 2 days after the first ZTF observation. The movement matches. The trajectory matches. 4AI exists. By October 1st, confirmations were coming in from all over the world. Astronomers found the object in archived data. Some pointed their telescopes at it and recorded it in real time, a faint point of light moving against the backdrop of stars. Almost invisible, but there. Undeniably there. NASA remained silent. The European Space Agency remained silent. The Jet Propulsion Laboratory issued a brief statement on October 3rd. The official press release is 1 page long. The gist: we are aware of a document circulating regarding a suspected object designated as 4A. The document is being verified for authenticity. Any unconfirmed data should not be considered official NASA discoveries. All discoveries of potentially hazardous objects undergo thorough verification before public announcement to avoid false alarms and ensure the accuracy of the information. The statement did not confirm the existence of 4I, but it did not deny it either. Independent observations continued. By mid-October, more than 50 astronomers around the world had confirmed observations of an object matching the description of 4I. The orbit was calculated independently by several groups. The results matched the leak. The eccentricity is hyperbolic. The speed was interstellar. The trajectory passed through the inner solar system. The perihelion was at the end of January 2026. The object was real, but there was no official confirmation. 4A did not appear in the catalogs of the Minor Planet Center, an international organization that registers all discoveries of asteroids and comets. No observatory issued an official circular. No scientific journal published an article. The object existed in a gray area. Astronomers saw it. They tracked it. But officially, it did not exist. Why? This is where speculation begins. This is where the data ends, and the questions that keep you awake at night begin. Imagine this. You are the director of NASA's Near-Earth Object Tracking Program. Your job is to find asteroids and comets that could pose a threat to Earth. You discover a new object. You check its orbit. You realize it's an interstellar visitor, the fourth in 8 years. Interesting, but not unprecedented. You start gathering data for an official announcement, and then you realize there is another interstellar object, discovered 6 weeks earlier, and they are moving in sync. What do? You check your calculations, once, twice, 10 times. You ask your colleagues to check independently. Everyone comes to the same conclusion. The synchronism is real. The relative speed is incredibly low. The trajectories are parallel. You begin to understand the implications. If these objects are connected, if they are indeed flying in formation, it changes everything. These are not just two random pieces of ice and rock thrown into interstellar space by gravitational interaction in some distant system. This is coordinated movement, and coordination requires either an incredible coincidence of natural processes or something else. You have to report it. This is potentially the most important discovery in the history of astronomy, but you also know what will happen when the news gets out. Panic, speculation, conspiracy theories. Every TV channel will be talking about alien probes. Every internet forum will explode with discussions of invasion. The stock markets will react. Governments will demand answers you don't have, and you have no proof. You have two objects moving in sync. That's it. Spectroscopy shows a normal cometary composition. No radio signals, no thermal anomalies, no signs of technology, just trajectory math that looks too perfect to be random. Is that enough for an announcement? Or do you wait? Gather more data? Try to find a natural explanation that will reassure the public? Maybe you decide to classify the information, not as a military secret, just as an internal document, until more data comes in, until there is certainty, until there is a way to present it without causing panic. But leaks happen. Someone on the inside decides that the public has a right to know. Someone with access to internal reports. Someone with a conscience that says it's wrong to hide this. And the document gets out. That's one version. Another version is more sinister. Maybe NASA isn't just waiting for more data. Maybe they already have more data. Data that wasn't in the leak. Observations that didn't make it into that 18-page PDF. Information that changes the picture so radically that it can't be released publicly without approval at the highest level. Maybe there is a third object, or a fourth and a fifth. Maybe the synchronicity isn't limited to two visitors. Maybe it's a pattern, a fleet, a formation, something that can't be explained by any natural processes. Or maybe one of the objects did something, changed course, sent out a signal, exhibited behavior that goes beyond simple cometary activity. We don't know. There is no official data. There is only silence. and silence, when independent observers around the world confirm the existence of the object, speaks louder than any denial. On October 7, 2025, an anonymous user on another forum, not the same one who leaked the first document, posted a message. It was short, no files, just text. The message said, "They changed the observation protocol. All telescopes tracking interstellar objects have received new directives. Data is no longer published in real time in the public domain. There is a 72-hour delay before release. The official reason, data quality control and prevention of false positives. The real reason, information control. It's hard to verify. Observatory observation protocols are not usually published. They are internal procedures. But some astronomers have begun to notice. Data from certain telescopes does indeed appear with a delay. Archives are not updated immediately. Circulars about new discoveries are released more slowly than before. Maybe it's just a coincidence. Maybe it's a new administrative process. Maybe it's nothing sinister. Or maybe someone doesn't want the public to see something in real time. On October 15th, a group of amateur astronomers announced the creation of an independent observation network. Its name, Interstellar Object Independent Tracking Network, abbreviated as IOITN. The goal, to track 3A Atlas and 4A independently of official channels. To use private telescopes, to publish data openly, without censorship, without delay. By the end of October, more than 100 astronomers from 30 countries had joined the network. Data began to arrive. Object positions, brightness, spectra, any changes in behavior. Everything was published on an open platform within hours of observation, and the data was normal. 3A Atlas continued to move along its predicted trajectory. Its brightness slowly increased as it approached the sun. Signs of cometary activity, gas and dust emissions, became more noticeable. Normal behavior for a comet approaching perihelion. 4A moved in sync, slightly behind, slightly to the side, but parallel. Its brightness was also increasing. The comet's coma, the cloud of gas around the nucleus, was becoming visible in long exposures. Also normal. Two objects, moving together, behaving like comets. Nothing abnormal, except for the fact that they were together. The math hadn't changed. The relative speed remained incredibly low. The trajectories remained parallel. With each day of observation, the probability of a random coincidence decreased. One astrophysicist, a professor at a university in Germany, published an article in a preprint archive. Title: Statistical Analysis of Trajectory Correlation between 3I Atlas and Alleged 4I Object. The article went through calculations, modeling, thousands of simulations of random interstellar objects passing through the solar system. The conclusion was cautious. The author wrote, "The probability of the observed trajectory correlation, assuming the independent origin of the objects, is less than 0.01%. This is a statistically significant deviation from randomness. Three possible explanations are proposed. First, the objects are fragments of a single parent body that disintegrated in interstellar space. Second, the objects originate from a dense cluster in the Oort cloud of another star system and were ejected by a simultaneous gravitational disturbance. The third is that the correlation is not the result of natural processes. The author did not elaborate on the third option. He simply left it hanging, as a possibility, as a question that science cannot ignore but cannot easily investigate. The article garnered thousands of views in its first day, discussions in academic circles, criticism of the methodology, defense of the calculations, suggestions for alternative explanations. But no one could dispute the basic fact: the two objects were moving too synchronously for it to be a coincidence. On October 28th, something happened that heightened the tension even more. An amateur astronomer in Japan reported that he had detected a change in the brightness of 4I, not a gradual increase associated with its approach to the sun, a sharp change. In 12 hours, the brightness increased by 3/10 of a magnitude. That's significant. That's unusual. Other observers confirmed it. The brightness of 4I had indeed increased, and then, 18 hours later, it returned to its previous level. A flare. Comets sometimes flare up. This is called an outburst, a sudden increase in activity. It can be caused by a collapse of material on the surface, exposing fresh ice. It can be caused by a crack in the crust, releasing gas pressure from within. It is a natural phenomenon, rare but not unprecedented. But here's what was strange. Tri-I Atlas flared up on the same day, not at the same hour, but within the same 24-hour period. On October 28th, observers in South Africa recorded an increase in the brightness of Tri-I Atlas by 0.2 magnitudes. The flare lasted about 20 hours, then faded. 2 objects, flares on the same day. Coincidence? Statisticians began to calculate. The probability that 2 independent objects will experience flares on the same day depends on the frequency of the flares. If the flares occur randomly with a certain probability per day, then the probability of a synchronous flare can be calculated. The problem: we don't know how frequent flares are in interstellar comets. We only have 3 confirmed examples of interstellar objects before 3A and 4A. Oumuamua showed no cometary activity at all. This was one of its mysteries. Borisov behaved like a normal comet, but no flares were observed during its passage, so there is not enough data. But one astronomer tried to estimate using data from ordinary comets in the solar system. Outbursts occur in about 5% of comets at any given observation period. If we take this as the base probability, then the chance that 2 comets will flare up on the same day is approximately 0.25%, 1 in 400. Not impossible. But add that to the synchronicity of their trajectories, their parallel motion, their identical speeds, and the cumulative probability of all these coincidences becomes microscopic. The forums exploded. News sites began to cover the story. Headlines ranged from cautious, astronomers discuss unusual behavior of interstellar objects, to sensational, paired probes from another star system approaching Earth. NASA still did not comment on 4I officially, but on November 5th, the agency issued a press release about 3I Atlas. Standard update: the object continues to approach perihelion on the predicted trajectory. Observations continue at several observatories. Spectroscopy confirms cometary composition. No threat to Earth. The object will pass at a safe distance. Not a word about 4I. Not a word about synchronicity. Not a word about flares. But at the end of the release, there was one line that caught my attention. A quote from the director of NASA's Near-Earth Object Program. He said, "Interstellar objects represent a unique opportunity to study material from other star systems. We will continue to monitor all such objects with the utmost care and will share the results with the scientific community as they are processed and verified. All such objects." Plural. This was NASA's first public acknowledgement that there may be more than one interstellar object actively being tracked at this time. Not a direct confirmation of 4A, but a hint, cautious, diplomatic, leaving room for interpretation. The community took it as a soft confirmation. NASA knows about 4A is tracking it, but is not ready to officially announce it for reasons that remain unclear. And the objects continued to move. By mid-November, 3A Atlas was 0.2 of an astronomical unit from the Sun, approximately 430 million kilometers. Between the orbits of Mars and Earth, its brightness reached the 14th magnitude, still too dim for the naked eye, but visible in medium-sized amateur telescopes. Amateur astronomers around the world observed it, photographed it, measured it. 4A followed at a distance of about 50 million kilometers behind, a little further from the Sun, a little dimmer. 15th magnitude, more difficult to observe, but confirmations continued to come in. The independent IOITN network published daily updates, trajectory graphs, brightness curves, spectral data. Everything was open. Everything was available for verification. And the data showed that the relative speed between the objects remained stable, less than 3 kilometers per second. The trajectories were parallel to within fractions of a degree. The synchronism was not disturbed, as if they were connected by an invisible thread, as if they were flying in formation, as if one was waiting for the other. On November 20th, an astrophysicist from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology gave an interview to a scientific journal. He was asked about 3A and 4A, about synchronicity, about probabilities. He was cautious. He chose his words carefully, but his answer was honest. He said, "We cannot rule out natural explanations. Fragmentation of the parent body, ejection from a dense cluster. gravitational interactions in a young star system that created paired trajectories. Nature is full of surprises, but we also cannot ignore what we observe. The synchronicity goes beyond what we would expect from random processes. If this were a one-off case, I would say, interesting anomaly, let's study it. But after Oumuamua, after its inexplicable acceleration, after all the questions it raised and we still haven't answered, now we see this. Two objects moving together, and I think we have an obligation to consider all possibilities, including those that are outside our comfort zone. The reporter asked, "Are you suggesting artificial origins?" The astrophysicist paused. Then he replied, "I mean that we must follow the data wherever it leads, and right now, the data is leading us into the unknown." The interview spread quickly. Quotes appeared on news sites, video clips on social media, discussions on forums. The MIT astrophysicist did not say that the objects were artificial. He said something more disturbing. "We don't know what they are, and we must be prepared for any answer." It was a turning point. Until then, the discussion had remained mainly within scientific circles. Astronomers and enthusiasts discussed trajectories, probabilities, statistics. But now a renowned scientist from a prestigious university had publicly acknowledged that something was wrong. Something was beyond the ordinary, and we had to consider possibilities that had not been spoken of aloud before. Public interest exploded. Within a week of the interview, search engine queries for the words 3A Atlas, 4A, and interstellar objects increased tenfold. News channels began to cover the story, not science programs, the main evening news. The headlines varied. Some were cautious, others were sensational, but they all asked the same question: are we alone? NASA issued another statement on November 24th, longer than the previous ones, more detailed. The agency confirmed, yes, there is a second interstellar object currently being tracked. Temporary designation A25Q41. The object has been under observation since August 2025. Its orbit has been calculated. Its interstellar origin has been confirmed. No threat to Earth. Official confirmation from 4A. But the statement continued. The agency acknowledged that yes, the trajectories of both objects show a certain correlation. This is an interesting feature that warrants further study. Preliminary analysis suggests that the objects may originate from a single source, possibly the disintegration of a larger parent body in interstellar space. This would explain the similar trajectories and velocities. Additional observations are needed to confirm this hypothesis. The statement ended with the standard phrases. NASA continues to monitor the situation. The data will be published after verification. The scientific community is invited to collaborate. There is no evidence of artificial origin. All observed characteristics are consistent with natural objects of cometary nature. The reaction was mixed. Part of the scientific community received the statement with relief. Finally, official recognition. Finally, NASA is speaking openly. The explanation about the parent body seemed reasonable. It is a natural process. Comets break apart. If 4I is a fragment of 3I Atlas, or both are fragments of a larger object, the synchronicity makes sense. But others pointed out problems with this explanation. If the objects are fragments of a single parent body, when did the breakup occur? Astronomers began to calculate. For two fragments to maintain such close synchronism throughout their interstellar journey, the breakup must have occurred relatively recently on a cosmic scale. Tens of thousands of years, perhaps, not millions. But where did they come from? Their trajectories point to the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The nearest stars in that region are several light years away. Even at an interstellar speed of 59 kilometers per second, the journey from the nearest system would have taken tens of thousands of years. If the disintegration occurred at the beginning of the journey, the fragments should have spread further apart. If at the end, what caused the disintegration? There is no star here that could heat the object and cause it to split. The math didn't add up perfectly. Someone suggested an alternative. Perhaps the breakup occurred in the Oort cloud of the original star system. Perhaps both objects were ejected from the system by the close passage of a star or giant planet. This would explain the synchronism. They began their journey together from the same point at similar speeds. Possibly. But then, why aren't they the same size? 3I Atlas is estimated to be 500 meters in diameter. 4i is about 350. If they are fragments, why is one much larger? Usually, fragments of more random sizes are formed during a breakup. And why only 2? Where are the rest of the debris? The questions multiplied faster than the answers. On November 28th, the independent IOITN network published a detailed report. The network's astronomers collected all available observation data for 2 months. They constructed accurate trajectory models. They calculated relative velocities with high precision. The results were presented in the form of an interactive visualization available online. The visualization showed the movement of both objects through the solar system. The trajectories were represented as lines in 3-dimensional space. It was possible to rotate the model, zoom in, and see the exact position of the objects at any given moment. And the picture was striking. The trajectories are not just parallel. They are mirror images of each other. 3A Atlas enters the plane of the ecliptic at a certain angle. 4A enters at an almost identical angle, but from the other side. Imagine 2 rays of light reflected from a surface. The angle of entry is equal to the angle of exit. This is physics. This is optics. This is not what you would expect from 2 random objects. The distance between the objects remains almost constant, about 50 million kilometers. That's less than the average distance between Earth and Mars. In cosmic terms, that's close. Very close. The report included a sensitivity analysis. What would happen if the orbital parameters were changed by 1%? By 5%? The models showed that even small changes in the speed or direction of either object would quickly destroy the synchronism. Within a few months, the objects would drift hundreds of millions of kilometers apart. But in reality, the synchronism persists, day after day, week after week, as if the objects were connected. One of the network participants, an amateur astronomer from Canada, wrote in the conclusion of the report, "Natural processes create order out of chaos. Gravity forms planets out of dust. Stars are born in clouds of gas. But order always has a cause, a physical law, a mathematical basis. There must be a reason for the synchronicity we observe. Either we do not understand the physics of interstellar objects deeply enough, and we are missing an obvious natural explanation, or the reason is not natural." He did not say that the objects are artificial. He said, "We do not understand, and we must be honest about it." Think about that for a moment. We live in an age where we can detect planets around other stars thousands of light years away. We can measure the mass of black holes at the centers of galaxies. We have landed robots on Mars and flown past Pluto. Science has reached incredible heights. And yet here, in our own solar system, 2 objects are moving in a way that we cannot fully explain. This is either humiliating or exciting. Perhaps both. On December 1st, something happened that added a new layer of mystery. A radio telescope in Argentina, part of the international VLBI network, Very Long Baseline Interferometry, was conducting routine observations of background sources for calibration. One of the regions of the sky being observed happened to include the area where 4i was located. The radio astronomers weren't looking for signals from the comet. They were simply doing technical work. But something unusual appeared in the data. A weak radio signal, narrowband, frequency 1.4 gigahertz. This is within the so-called water window, a frequency range where the interstellar medium is relatively transparent to radio waves, a range that astrobiologists often refer to as optimal for interstellar communication if such a thing exists. The signal was weak, very weak, at the limit of the telescope's sensitivity. It lasted about 11 minutes. Then it disappeared. Radio astronomers checked the equipment. No malfunctions. They checked the recordings. The signal was real. They checked the position in the sky. The signal came from the region where 4i was located, with an accuracy of the antenna's angular error. They did not announce this immediately. Radio astronomers are cautious. False signals happen. Interference from satellites. Reflections from ground sources. Earth technology creates radio noise on a multitude of frequencies. One signal lasting 11 minutes is interesting, but not enough to draw conclusions. They requested observation time on other telescopes. Confirmation is needed. Rediscovery is needed. On December 3rd, the Meerkat radio telescope array in South Africa tuned in to 4a. The observations lasted 6 hours. Its sensitivity is higher than that of the Argentine telescope. If the signal is there, Meerkat should see it. The data was processed over 2 days. Radio astronomy requires careful analysis, noise removal, calibration, pattern searching. On December 5th, there was a leak. Someone from the Meerkat team wrote on an astronomy forum, anonymously. The message was short. We saw it. A narrowband signal. Frequency 1.4 gigahertz. Repeated 3 times in 6 hours. An interval of approximately 110 minutes between repetitions. An official announcement will be made soon. But I thought people should know. The forum exploded. A radio signal from an interstellar object. Narrowband. A sign of a non-natural process. Natural radio sources are usually broadband. Pulsars, quasars, stars, all emit across a wide spectrum of frequencies. A narrowband signal suggests a specific physical process, or technology, repeating at intervals of 110 minutes. That's periodicity. That's structure. That's not random noise. Skeptics immediately pointed to alternative explanations. Maser radiation. Natural masers, cosmic equivalents of lasers operating on radio waves, can produce narrowband signals. They are observed in gas clouds around stars, in star-forming regions. Perhaps the coma of 4I contains molecules that produce maser radiation under certain conditions. Possibly. But masers are usually associated with specific molecules. Water maser, methanol maser, hydroxyl maser. Each has a characteristic frequency. 1/4 of a gigahertz does not correspond exactly to any known maser line. Close to some, but not exactly. And the periodicity? 110 minutes. That could be the rotation period of the object. If 4A rotates every 110 minutes and there is a source of radiation on its surface, natural or not, then the signal will appear every time the source is directed toward us. That explains the repeatability. But then the question arises, what is this source? On December 7th, the Meerkat team released an official statement, cautious, scientific. They confirmed, yes, a narrowband radio signal has been detected coming from the region where object I-25Q41 is located. The frequency is 1.426,000 gigahertz. The signal was observed 3 times during the observation period, at approximately 109-minute intervals. The origin of the signal is currently unknown. Natural explanations are being considered, including maser emission from molecules in the object's coma. Additional observations are planned to confirm and characterize the phenomenon. The statement did not mention the possibility of artificial origin. It didn't need to. Everyone who read it thought about it. News channels picked up the story again. The headlines became bolder. Radio signal from an interstellar object. Possible communication? Astronomers puzzled by periodic radiation. SETI, the organization searching for extraterrestrial intelligence, released a statement. They acknowledged that narrowband periodic signals are always interesting in the context of searching for technological signatures. However, experience shows that most such signals are of natural or terrestrial origin. SETI plans to point its radio telescopes at the object for independent verification. If the signal is confirmed and demonstrates characteristics incompatible with natural processes, it will become a priority for further study. SETI is always cautious. They have seen too many false alarms. The WOW signal in 1977. Fast radio bursts that turned out to be interference from a microwave oven. Each time, expectations rose and then were dashed by natural explanations. But this was different. This was not a single random signal. It was a repeating pattern from an object that was already behaving abnormally. An object that was flying in sync with another. An object that had raised questions from the moment it was discovered. On December 9th, the Arecibo radio telescope... Arecibo was destroyed in 2020. Not anymore. Instead, the VLA radio telescope, the Very Large Array in New Mexico, USA. The VLA pointed its 27 antennas at 4I. 8 hours of observation, high sensitivity, high resolution. The results came back a week later. Signal confirmed. Narrowband. Frequency identical to Meerkat observations. Repeatability confirmed. Period of 108.6 minutes. Stable. No drift, no change. The VLA was able to do more than just confirm. With its high resolution, the team was able to pinpoint the source of the signal. And the source was not just in the general 4I region. The source came directly from the object, with an accuracy of a few arcseconds. This ruled out many alternative explanations. It was not a background source that happened to coincide with the line of sight. It was not interference from a satellite. The signal came from the object itself or from its immediate vicinity. A natural maser? Perhaps. But then one would have to explain why the maser operates at this particular frequency, why the period is exactly 108 minutes, why the signal is so stable. The VLA team wrote in its report, "The observed characteristics are consistent with radiation from a rotating source on the surface or in close proximity to the object. The nature of the source requires further study." They didn't say technology. They said requires further study. But between the lines, it read, "We don't know what it is, and it's disturbing." What about 3A Atlas? Astronomers immediately began searching for radio signals from it. If 4AI emits, maybe 3AI does too. Several telescopes were pointed at it. Observations began on December 11th. The data was processed. Astronomers looked for narrowband signals, any periodicity, any anomalies. Nothing. 3A Atlas was radio silent. No signals, only the background noise of space. A normal comet should not be a strong radio source, and 3A lived up to expectations. Silence. It was strange. Two objects flying in sync, one emitting a periodic radio signal, the other silent. If both were fragments of a single parent body, why did they behave differently? If both were probes, why was only one transmitting? There were many theories. Perhaps the radio emission was related to composition. Perhaps 4I contained minerals or molecules that 3I did not, and they created a maser effect. Perhaps 3I had a different rotation period, and its potential signal was not directed toward Earth. Maybe 3I is dormant, and 4I is active. Or, as some whispered on forums, maybe one is a courier and the other is a guard. One transmits data, the other protects. One speaks, the other listens. Speculation went beyond the realm of science. Science fiction crept into the discussions. But how can you blame people? The data led to the unknown, and when science reaches the limits of understanding, imagination fills in the gaps. On December 15, 2025, the U.S. government issued a statement, not NASA, not the Department of Defense, the White House. The president's press secretary spoke at a briefing. He said, "We are aware of ongoing observations of interstellar objects currently passing through the solar system. The scientific community is working diligently to understand the nature of these objects. At this time, there is no evidence indicating a threat to national security or public safety. We continue to monitor the situation in cooperation with international partners and will provide updates as new information becomes available." A brief statement. Reassuring. Nothing specific. But the very fact that the White House felt it necessary to speak out indicated that the situation had reached a level requiring attention at the highest level of government. This is no longer just a scientific curiosity. It is an issue that concerns governments. Other countries followed suit. The European Union, China, Russia, Japan, all issued brief statements, all reassuring, all essentially the same. We know, we are watching, don't panic. But why do governments need to say, "Don't panic," if there is no reason to panic? Public attention reached a peak. Polls showed that more than 70% of the population in developed countries knew about the 3As and 4As. More than half believed that the objects might not be natural. Forums, social networks, and news comments were filled with discussions. Conspiracy theories proliferated. Some claimed that governments knew more than they were saying. Others predicted contact, invasion, the end of the world. Astronomers called for calm. They published articles explaining that unusual does not mean artificial, that science takes time, that hasty conclusions are dangerous. But the data did not reassure people. The data continued to be strange. On December 20th, an amateur astronomer in Chile made an observation that added another layer of mystery. He photographed Tri-Eye Atlas through his 8-inch telescope. Long exposure, 30 minutes. The goal was to capture the comet's coma and tail. When he processed the image, he discovered something unexpected. In the coma of Comet 3I Atlas, in the cloud of gas and dust surrounding the nucleus, a structure appeared. Not a chaotic cloud, a structure, a spiral pattern. Clear, geometric. He posted the image on a forum. Within hours, other astronomers confirmed it. They pointed their telescopes and took their own pictures. The spiral was there. Visible. Real. Spiral structures in cometary clouds are not unprecedented. They happen. When a comet rotates and ejects gas from certain active areas on its surface, the gas can form spiral jets. It's the physics of rotation. It's the fountain effect. It has been observed in other comets. But the spiral of 3AI Atlas was unusually regular, too symmetrical. One astronomer specializing in comets commented, "Usually comet spirals are uneven and asymmetrical because the active areas on the surface are distributed randomly. Here, the spiral looks almost mathematically precise, as if created with a compass." Measurements showed that the spiral had about 8 turns visible in the images. The distance between the turns increased from the center outward, a sign of a constant ejection velocity from a rotating source. The math is simple. The geometry is elegant. The rotation period could be calculated from the spiral. If you know the speed of the gas and the distance between the turns, you can calculate how fast the source is rotating. The calculations showed that the rotation period of Tri-I Atlas is approximately 107 minutes. 107 minutes, almost identical to the period of the radio signal from 4A, 108 minutes. The forums fell silent. It couldn't be a coincidence. 2 objects flying in sync with almost identical rotation periods? The probability of this is astronomically small. The rotation of celestial bodies is usually random. Asteroids rotate with periods ranging from minutes to days, comets from hours to weeks. There is no reason why 2 objects, even if they are fragments of the same parent, should have identical rotation periods. Fragmentation usually results in random angular moments, unless they were specifically tuned to rotate synchronously. On December 22nd, a team of astrophysicists from the University of California published a preprint article. Title: Rotational Synchronization in the Interstellar Object Pair 3AI and 4AI, Natural Mechanisms and Alternatives. The article discussed the physics of tidal synchronization. When 2 bodies are close to each other, gravitational interaction can synchronize their rotation. The Moon is synchronized with the Earth. It always shows one side. This is tidal locking. Could 3As and 4As be tidally synchronized? The article calculated this. Tidal synchronization requires proximity and time. The closer the objects are, the stronger the effect. The longer they are together, the greater the likelihood of synchronization. The problem: 3AI and 4AI are 50 million kilometers apart. That's far. Too far for tidal synchronization in a reasonable amount of time. To synchronize rotation at that distance, the objects would have had to be together for millions of years, maybe tens of millions. Is this possible? Maybe, if they traveled together for a very long time. If they were ejected from their original system millions of years ago and flew together all that time, tidal synchronization could have occurred. But then another problem arises. If they have been flying together for millions of years, where did they come from? The nearest stars are light years away. At a speed of 59 kilometers per second, a journey from the nearest system, let's say Proxima Centauri, 4/10 of a light year away, would take about 20,000 years, not millions. Not enough for tidal synchronization, unless they came from a more distant system, from a system hundreds of light years away. Then the journey would take millions of years. But then why does their trajectory point to the constellation Sagittarius, where there are no particularly dense star regions? The article ended with a cautious conclusion. Tidal synchronization is possible under certain assumptions about the origin and history of the objects. However, not all of the observed characteristics can be easily explained by natural processes. Additional data is needed. Alternatives were mentioned in one paragraph. The authors wrote, "If natural explanations prove insufficient, the scientific method requires consideration of hypotheses that go beyond traditional paradigms. This includes, but is not limited to, the possibility of artificial origin or modification of one or both objects." They said it. They published it in a scientific article. Artificial origin as a legitimate hypothesis. The scientific community was divided. Some welcomed the openness. Science must follow the data, even if it leads to uncomfortable places. Others criticized it. Too early. Not enough evidence. Invoking aliens is a last resort when all natural explanations have been exhausted. And they haven't been exhausted yet. but the data continued to accumulate, and each new observation raised more questions. On December 25th, Christmas Day, the team of spectroscopists published their analysis of the composition of 4AI. They used data from several telescopes, high-resolution spectra, detailed analysis of absorption and emission lines. The composition was cometary: water ice, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia, organic compounds, all typical for comets. But there was one exception, one spectral line that did not correspond exactly to any known substance. The line was in the ultraviolet range, wavelength 283.6 nanometers, close to the lines of some organic molecules but not identical. The intensity of the line was weak, but it was definitely present in several independent observations. The team speculated that it could be a complex organic molecule not previously identified in comets. Space chemistry is rich. There may be molecules we have never seen before, especially in objects from other star systems where the conditions of formation were different. Or, as some cautiously hinted, it could be something else, something unnatural, something that does not form in nature. Speculation about biological molecules began to emerge. Could this be a sign of life? Could 4I carry biological material from another system? Panspermia, the idea that life can spread between stars on comets and asteroids, is not a new concept. But there has never been any direct evidence. The team emphasized that one unidentified spectral line is not enough to draw biological conclusions. Additional observations are needed. The molecule needs to be identified. All abiotic explanations need to be ruled out. But the idea made the news. An interstellar object could carry life. The headlines simplified, the simplification distorted, but attention was captured. On December 30th, the independent IOITN network published another report. This time it was about photometry, measuring the brightness of objects over time. Astronomers collected thousands of brightness measurements of both objects over the past few months. They constructed light curves, graphs of brightness versus time. The light curves showed periodic variations. This is normal. Rotating objects of irregular shape change brightness as they rotate. Different sides reflect different amounts of light. The period of variation gives the period of rotation. For 3I Atlas, the period was 107 minutes. Confirmed. This coincides with the spiral structure. For 4I, it was 108 minutes. This coincides with the radio signal. But there was something else. The amplitude of the variations, how much the brightness changes, was unusually small. For both objects, the variations were only about 0.05 stellar magnitudes. That's very small. Most asteroids and comets show variations of 0.1 to 0.3 magnitudes or more because they are irregular in shape. A small amplitude suggests an almost spherical shape, or a very symmetrical one. Objects that rotate but hardly change their apparent area because they are roughly the same on all sides. Natural comets are usually not perfectly spherical. They are formed by collisions, accretion, and uneven processes. They have dents, protrusions, and irregular shapes. Perfect spheres are rare, unless the objects have been processed, smoothed out, shaped. The report did not make any bold statements. It simply presented the data. Small amplitude, almost spherical shape. Interpretation is left to the reader, but the implications lingered. Two objects, synchronous motion, synchronous rotation. One emits radio signals. One shows a geometric structure in the coma. Both are almost perfectly spherical. Each element could be explained separately, but all together, the pattern was becoming difficult to ignore. On January 3, 2026, the James Webb Space Telescope pointed its instruments at Tri-I Atlas. JWST is the most powerful infrared telescope ever built. It can see details that are inaccessible to ground-based telescopes. It can analyze chemical composition with incredible accuracy. The observations lasted 48 hours. Several instruments were used: spectroscopy, photometry, coronagraphy to study the coma. The data was confidential. JWST operates on a proprietary time system. The team that requested the observations has exclusive access to the data for 1 year before it is released to the public. But given the public interest and importance of the object, the team agreed to expedite the analysis and publish preliminary results. A press release appeared on January 9th. JWST confirmed that the composition of Tri-A Atlas is typical of comets. Water ice dominates. Carbon-containing compounds are present. Silicates have been detected. Nothing abnormal in the chemistry. But the images revealed details that caused the team to reconsider their interpretation. The core of Tri-A Atlas, the solid central part, was resolved. JWST saw its shape, and the shape was, surprisingly regular. Not a perfect sphere, but very close. Assessment: the object has axes that differ by less than 10%, almost a spheroid. The coma, the cloud of gas, showed not only a spiral structure, it showed multiple jets, 4 main jets emanating from different points on the surface. The jets are symmetrical, almost evenly distributed around the object's equator, 90 degrees apart. 4 jets, 90 degrees, symmetry. Natural comets can have multiple jets, but symmetrical arrangement is rare. Active areas on comets are usually random, cracks in the crust, exposed ice patches. They do not organize themselves into regular patterns. The press release was cautious. The observed symmetry is interesting and may indicate the internal structure of the object. Perhaps the core has a layered structure, and jets arise along lines of weakness. Models are needed to explain the observed distribution of activity. But a comment from one team member included in the press release was more candid. She said, "I have studied dozens of comets in my career. I have seen many shapes and behaviors, but I have never seen one so orderly. That doesn't mean there's anything unnatural here, but it does mean that 3A Atlas is an exceptional object, and we should be open to unexpected discoveries." Unexpected discoveries. A diplomatic way of saying, we don't know what to think. On January 10th, an amateur astronomer in Russia reported that he had detected a change in the trajectory of 4AI. A slight deviation from the predicted path. Barely noticeable, but definitely there. He used archival data and compared it with recent observations. The position of 4AI differed from the ephemeris, the calculated trajectory, by a few angular seconds. It could have been a measurement error, or a calculation error. But other astronomers checked it. They used their own observations, independent calculations. They confirmed it. 4AI deviated from the predicted trajectory, non-gravitational acceleration, the same effect that was observed in Oumuamua in 2017-2018. At that time, it caused a storm of controversy. Natural explanations included reactive thrust from outgassing, solar pressure, and the Yarkovsky effect. But the exact value of Oumuamua's acceleration was difficult to explain with standard models. Now, 4I showed the same thing. The acceleration was small, about 3 times 10 to the minus 4th power meters per second squared, microscopic, but enough to shift the trajectory by a measurable amount over weeks of observation. The direction of acceleration? Away from the sun, along the line connecting 4I with the sun. This is consistent with outgassing. Gas ejected from a surface heated by sunlight creates reactive thrust. But the intensity of outgassing required to produce the observed acceleration must be significant, and spectroscopy did not show such strong activity. The amount of gas visible in the coma was insufficient to explain the acceleration. This is the same problem that was encountered with Oumuamua. There is acceleration, but the visible activity is insufficient. Either most of the outgassing is invisible, the release of molecules that do not emit in the observable ranges, or there is another source of acceleration. On January 12th, a group of theorists published an article proposing an alternative explanation. Title: Electric Solar Sail as a Mechanism for Non-Gravitational Acceleration of Interstellar Objects. The idea: if an object has an electric charge and is in the flow of solar wind, charged particles from the sun, it experiences a force. This force can create acceleration without visible degassing. Electric sails are a concept from space engineering. Deploy a charged structure that interacts with the solar wind to create thrust. This has been proposed for future space missions. Could 3As and 4As naturally have such a mechanism? Unlikely. Natural objects can accumulate charge from cosmic rays and solar wind, but the charges are usually small and unstable, unless someone created an electric sail, intentionally. The article was speculative. The authors emphasized that this was a hypothesis that needed to be tested. But the very fact that scientists were publishing articles about technological explanations for interstellar objects showed how far the Overton window had shifted in scientific discourse. A year ago, mentioning alien probes in a serious article would have been met with ridicule. Now it was on the table, not as the main hypothesis, but as a legitimate possibility that could not be ignored. On January 15th, the day before Tri-Atlas's perihelion, NASA held a press conference. Live broadcast. The director of planetary science, the agency's chief scientist, several leading astronomers from various institutions. The conference room was packed. Journalists from all over the world, cameras, microphones. The online broadcast attracted millions of viewers. The director of planetary science began. He summed up the situation. 2 interstellar objects, Tri-Atlas, and an object temporarily designated 4IQ41, are currently passing through the inner solar system. Both objects exhibit characteristics consistent with comets: icy composition, degassing, coma formation. The trajectories of both objects have been calculated with high precision. They will pass perihelion and leave the solar system without risk of collision with Earth or other planets. Then he moved on to the observed anomalies: synchronous trajectories, similar rotation periods, radio signals from 4AI, symmetrical structure of 3AI, non-gravitational acceleration. He presented it honestly, without understatement, without exaggeration. He said, "These characteristics raise questions to which we do not yet have complete answers. We are considering various hypotheses. Natural processes remain the most likely explanations. Fragmentation, tidal synchronization, massor radiation, symmetrical internal structure, all of these are possible. But we also recognize that some observations go beyond what we have seen before in natural objects." The journalist asked, "Are you considering the possibility of artificial origin?" The director paused. He chose his words carefully. Then he replied, "Our main task is to follow the scientific method, to collect data, to test hypotheses. At this point, all observed characteristics can potentially be explained by natural processes, although some explanations require specific conditions or have not been sufficiently studied. We do not exclude any hypotheses a priori. If the data ultimately points to an origin that is not consistent with natural processes, we will accept that. But at this point, we have not reached that point." Another journalist, "What will happen when the objects reach perihelion? Do you expect any changes in behavior?" The chief scientist replied, "Perihelion is a critical moment for comets. Maximum heating from the sun, maximum activity. We expect increased outgassing, possibly flares, changes in the coma structure. All telescopes capable of observing the objects will be pointed at them during the perihelion period. We hope to obtain data that will help answer many questions." Third journalist, "If the objects turn out to be artificial, what will the protocol be? Does humanity have a plan for contact?" The director smiled. Tense, he said, "There are international protocols for the discovery of extraterrestrial intelligence, developed by SETI and the UN. They include verification, confirmation, widespread notification of the scientific community and the public, and coordination between countries. But let's be clear, we are still a long way from applying these protocols. We are studying interesting natural objects with unusual characteristics, not signals from intelligent life." But his tone implied, "Not signals yet. Not yet." The conference lasted an hour. The questions continued. The answers remained cautious. NASA did its best to balance transparency with preventing panic, but the public heard between the lines. Scientists don't know. Something strange is happening, and in a day, the strangest object will reach its closest point to the sun. What would happen then? No one knew. But the world was watching. Telescopes were ready. Cameras were pointed at the sky. Humanity held its breath. On January 16, 2026, at 14:37 UTC, 3A Atlas reached its perihelion. Distance to the Sun, 2.83 astronomical units, 423 million kilometers, between the orbits of Mars and Earth. Astronomers observed. Data came in, images, spectra, photometry. Tri-Eye's brightness increased, the coma expanded, the jets became more intense. Normal behavior for a comet at perihelion. Solar heat evaporates ice. Gas pressure ejects dust. The object becomes active. But there was one detail that no one expected. At the moment of perihelion, radio telescopes pointed at 3A recorded a signal. Narrowband, short, lasted 17 seconds. Frequency, 1.4 gigahertz. The same frequency as 4I. 3A spoke. The signal was weak, barely distinguishable above the background noise, but several telescopes recorded it independently. The VLA in New Mexico, the Meerkat Array in South Africa, the Effelsberg Radio Telescope in Germany. All confirmed, at the moment of perihelion, 3A Atlas emitted a narrowband radio signal at a frequency of 1.426 thousandths of a gigahertz, the same frequency at which 4I had been transmitting periodically since early December. 17 seconds. Then silence. The radio astronomers continued to listen. The hours passed. No repeats. 3A returned to silence. Cometary activity continued. The brightness remained high. The coma expanded. Jets of gas shot into space. But the airwaves were clear. 17 seconds. What can be transmitted in 17 seconds? The teams began to analyze the signal. Recordings from different telescopes were combined. The signal-to-noise ratio was improved. They looked for structure, modulation, any pattern that might indicate informational content. The signal was not just a continuous tone. There was modulation within the 17 seconds. Amplitude modulation, changes in signal intensity, not random fluctuations. Structured. Initial analysis showed that the modulation consisted of a series of pulses, short bursts of intensity separated by pauses. The duration of the pulses varied. Some lasted 0.1 seconds, others lasted 0.3 seconds. The pauses between them also varied. It resembled a code, Morse code, a binary sequence, short and long pulses carrying information. But was it really code, or just fluctuations in natural mass radiation? The team from the SETI Institute undertook a detailed analysis. They are experts in finding patterns in signals. Their job is to distinguish natural noise from potentially intelligent messages. On January 18th, they published a preliminary report. The signal contains a structure that is incompatible with known natural radio sources. The pulse pattern does not correspond to the behavior of natural masers. The distribution of pulse durations is not random. Statistical analysis shows a significant deviation from randomness with a probability of error less than 0.01%. In other words, the pattern is real, not noise, not an artifact, structure. What did the pattern mean? The team tried to decode it. They considered various schemes. Binary code, short pulses as zeros, long pulses as ones. They got a sequence. But what did it mean? A number? A message? Coordinates? No one knew. The sequence did not correspond to any obvious mathematical constants. Not prime numbers, not pi, not phi, not Fibonacci numbers. If it was a message, the key to decoding it was unclear. One researcher suggested, maybe it's not a message for us. Maybe it's a connection between objects. 3AI transmits to 4AI, or confirms receipt of a transmission from 4AI, or synchronizes, or coordinates the next stage of something. Speculation, but not unfounded. Because after the signal from 3I, 4AI's behavior changed. On January 19th, astronomers tracking 4AI noticed that the periodic radio signal had changed its repetition frequency. Previously, the signal repeated every 108 minutes. Now the interval had shortened to 93 minutes. The change was abrupt, not gradual. One day, 108 minutes. The next day, 93. As if someone had switched the setting. The object's rotation period had not changed. Photometry showed that 4I continued to rotate at the same rate, 108 minutes, but the radio signal no longer matched the rotation period. This ruled out the simple explanation of a rotating natural source on the surface. If the source was tied to the rotation, the signal period could not change independently of the rotation, unless the source was directional and had changed its orientation, or unless the source was not tied to the surface at all. On January 21st, 4I flared up again. Its brightness increased by 0.4 of a magnitude in 12 hours. It was a more intense flare than in October. The coma expanded. Jets of gas became visible even in moderate-resolution images. And at the peak of the flare, the radio signal stopped. Complete silence. Meerkat listened. VLA listened. Effelsberg listened. Nothing. 4II fell silent. The flare lasted 36 hours. Then it began to fade. The brightness decreased. The coma contracted. By January 23rd, the object had returned to its previous state, and the radio signal resumed, but with a new period, now every 79 minutes. Astronomers could no longer pretend that this was a natural process with fixed parameters. Natural sources do not change their periods arbitrarily. They do not fall silent during flares and resume with different characteristics. Something was controlling the signal. Something was regulating the frequency. Something was making decisions. On January 24th, the United States government convened a closed meeting. Participants: representatives from NASA, the Department of Defense, the CIA, the National Security Council, leading astronomers, astrobiologists. Topic: threat assessment and development of response protocols for potential contact with non-human intelligence. The details of the meeting were not made public, but leaks occurred. Anonymous sources told reporters that the consensus at the meeting was that the objects demonstrate characteristics that cannot be explained by natural processes with a high degree of certainty. It was recommended to increase the level of monitoring, prepare scenarios in case of changes in the behavior of the objects, coordinate with international partners. They tried to avoid panic. Public statements remained reassuring. There is no threat. Observations continue. Science is working. But behind the scenes, the government was preparing. For what? No one knew for sure. Maybe for nothing. Maybe for first contact. On January 26th, an amateur astronomer in Australia made an observation that blew up the internet. He photographed the region between Tri-I and 4I, a wide field, long exposure. The goal was to capture both objects in one frame. They are close enough on the celestial sphere for this. Something extra appeared in the image, a faint point of light, between the two objects. Not a star. Stars don't move on such a timescale. Not a known asteroid. The database has been checked. A new object. He published an image with coordinates. Within hours, other astronomers focused on the region. They confirmed it. The object is there. It is moving. Its brightness is magnitude 18. It is very dim. Its trajectory has been preliminarily calculated. Hyperbolic. The fifth interstellar object, or, as people began to whisper on forums, the third member of the fleet. The designation was assigned quickly. 5A/2026 by 11. 5A by 11. It took several days to calculate the trajectory. Observations from different nights are needed for an accurate orbit. By January 29th, the preliminary orbit had been determined. Entry velocity, 58.2 kilometers per second, almost identical to 3I and 4I. Arrival direction, Sagittarius constellation, same region of the sky. Angular distance in the sky from 3A, 9 degrees. From 4A, 6 degrees. 3 objects. A cluster in the celestial sphere. Similar speeds. One direction. Relative speed between 5AI and 4AI. Less than 2 kilometers per second. The impossible statistics became absurd. 3 interstellar objects arriving independently, coincidentally having almost identical vectors of motion? The probability is so small that it cannot be seriously considered. Astronomers stopped talking about coincidences. They started talking about a mission, about a fleet, about a purposeful arrival. On February 1st, 2026, NASA held an emergency press conference. The director of the agency spoke personally. Next to him were the director of planetary science, the chief scientist, and a representative of the Department of Defense. The agency director began, "We confirm the discovery of a third interstellar object, temporarily designated 5IB11, currently passing through the solar system. The object's trajectory shows a correlation with 2 previously discovered interstellar objects, 3I Atlas and 4IQ41. All 3 objects have similar speeds and directions of movement." He paused. The room was completely silent. He continued, "The scientific consensus is that the probability of such a correlation occurring by chance through independent natural processes is extremely low. We are obliged to consider alternative explanations. After consulting with leading experts in the fields of astronomy, astrobiology, and planetary science, we have concluded that the observed characteristics of these objects warrant further study with an openness to all scientifically valid hypotheses." A journalist shouted out a question without waiting for his turn. Are you saying these are alien probes? The director replied cautiously. We are saying that traditional models of natural origin do not explain all the observed data. We are not making any definitive conclusions, but we recognize that the hypothesis of non-human technological origin of one or more objects is one of the possibilities that needs to be seriously considered. An explosion. Questions from all sides. Cameras flashed. Voices shouted over each other. A representative of the Department of Defense took the microphone. Let me be clear. At this time, the objects are not exhibiting hostile behavior. Their trajectories do not indicate a collision with Earth or other planets. We are not detecting dangerous radiation, weapon systems, or threatening maneuvers. Our priority is observation and understanding. We are coordinating with allies and international partners to ensure safety and share information. This was an official acknowledgement, not complete, not absolute, but an acknowledgement that humanity may be observing the first evidence of extraterrestrial technology. The world changed in that moment. The news spread instantly. Every channel, every website, every social network. Headlines ranged from cautious to apocalyptic. NASA acknowledges possibility of alien probes in solar system. 3 interstellar objects may be artificial. Are we alone? The public reaction was mixed. Some greeted the news with enthusiasm. We are not alone. This is the greatest moment in human history. Others reacted with fear. What do they want? Are we safe? Still, others were skeptical. Not enough evidence. NASA is panicking for no reason. The stock markets reacted. A drop in the first hours after the announcement, then stabilization. Investors did not know how to assess the news. What impact do alien probes have on the economy? No experience, no precedents. Religious leaders issued statements. The Pope. The discovery of intelligent life beyond Earth does not contradict church teachings. God created a vast universe. We must welcome our cosmic brothers with open hearts. Islamic scholars. The Quran speaks of many worlds. Allah is Almighty. Imam Ali. Islam accepts the possibility of life on other planets. Buddhist monks. All beings are part of the universe. Life form is irrelevant to Dharma. Philosophers and writers weighed in. What does this discovery mean for human self-awareness? For our uniqueness? For our place in the universe? But astronomers continued to work. Emotions would have to wait. Data was needed now. The Five Eyes observations intensified. Every available telescope was pointed at the new object. Spectroscopy, photometry, radio observations, composition, cometary, water ice, carbon-containing compounds. Nothing unusual. Size, estimated at about 400 meters in diameter, between 3A and 4A in size. Rotation period, calculated from brightness variations. 106 minutes, almost identical to 3II. Almost identical to 4II. 3 objects, 3 nearly identical rotation periods. Synchronization at a level that cannot be coincidental. Radio signals? Astronomers listened. Meerkat. VLA. All radio telescopes capable of seeing 5II. Nothing. Silence. The third object was silent, just as 3II was silent before perihelion, just as 4II was silent at first, until it began transmitting in December. Maybe 5I would speak later, maybe at perihelion, maybe on command. 5I's trajectory showed perigee expected on February 19, 2026, in 18 days. Distance at perigee, 2.85 astronomical units. Almost identical to 3I and 4AI. 3 objects, 3 almost identical trajectories, 3 almost identical perihelia. The difference in the time of passing perihelion. 3I, January 16th. 4I, January 28th. 5I, February 19th. Intervals, 12 days between the first two, 22 days between the second two. The intervals are not uniform, but they are not random either. It is as if they were calculated for a specific purpose. On February 4th, a team of mathematicians published their analysis. They studied the geometry of the system, the positions of the 3 objects in space at the moments of their perihelia. They looked for patterns. They found something remarkable. At the moment of Trii's perihelion, the positions of Earth, Trii, and the direction of the galactic center formed an almost straight line. The deviation was less than 2 degrees. At the moment of 4A's perihelion, the positions of Mars, 4I, and the direction to Alpha Centauri formed a line. The deviation was less than 3 degrees. The prediction for 5I. At the moment of its perihelion, the positions of Venus, 5I, and the direction of Vega, one of the brightest stars in the sky, will form a line. 3 objects, 3 alignments, 3 different planets, 3 different stars. Coincidence? The team calculated the probability. For one alignment within 3 degrees, approximately 1 in 50. For 3 alignments simultaneously, 1 in 125,000. The article concluded, the observed geometry of the alignments suggests deliberate planning of trajectories and perigee times. If the objects are artificial, the alignments could serve as a signaling function, a demonstration of precise navigation control capabilities, or an indication of directions to other star systems of interest. Signaling function. They demonstrate capabilities. They show we can navigate accurately. We know where your planets are. We know where other stars are. We control trajectories with a precision that you can barely measure. Or, alternatively, the alignments indicate directions. We came from there, or look there, or these stars are important. There were many interpretations. There was not enough data to draw conclusions, but the pattern was undeniable. On February 6th, something happened that heightened the tension to the limit. The radio telescope in China, FAST, the largest single aperture in the world, was observing 4A. The team was looking for details in the structure of the radio signal. High resolution, high sensitivity. Something new appeared in the data. A second frequency. Next to the main signal at 1.4 GHz, a faint signal appeared at 1.442 GHz. The difference in frequencies, 0.042 GHz, 42 MHz, 42, a number that science fiction fans recognized immediately. The answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything from Douglas Adams' book, The Hitchhiker's Guide, to the galaxy. Coincidence? A joke from aliens who read Earth literature? Or just a number that people attach meaning to, but the senders had no intention of doing so? Skeptics pointed out that the number 42 has no physical meaning. It is not a mathematical constant. It is not a fundamental frequency. It is just a number. To see a message in it is apophenia, finding patterns where there are none. But others pointed out that if you want to attract the attention of a technological civilization, using numbers or frequencies that have cultural significance in their society would be effective. If someone had studied Earth transmissions, radio, television, the internet, they would know about popular references. They would know that 42 would elicit a response. It was impossible to prove or disprove. But the discussion showed how deeply humanity was immersed in trying to understand the intentions of the objects. On February 8th, the governments of the world's largest countries, the US, China, Russia, the EU, Japan, and India, issued a joint statement. It was unprecedented. The Cold War had long since ended, but coordination at this level was rare. The statement acknowledged that the objects currently passing through the solar system exhibit characteristics that cannot be fully explained by natural processes. The possibility of artificial origin is being seriously considered. All countries commit to sharing observation data openly and coordinating responses if necessary. Humanity faces this situation as a single species, not as divided nations. Fine words. But behind the scenes, tensions remained. Each country's military satellites were reoriented to observe the objects. Radars tracked them. Missile systems. No one officially mentioned missiles, but rumors circulated. Could humanity attack the objects if they proved to be a threat? Were our missiles fast enough? Were they powerful enough? Pointless questions, perhaps. If the objects are the technology of a civilization capable of interstellar travel, our primitive missiles are unlikely to be effective. But governments plan. It's in their nature. On February 12th, astronomers made another discovery. Analyzing archived data from survey telescopes, a team in the UK found an object they had missed before. Very faint. 19th magnitude. Its movement is barely noticeable in a few frames, spread out over weeks. Designation: 6A. The trajectory has been calculated preliminarily. Hyperbolic orbit. Interstellar origin. Speed: 57 kilometers per second. Direction: the constellation Sagittarius. Fourth object in the cluster. Perihelion predicted. March 12, 2026. 4 objects. Intervals between perihelia, 12 days, 22 days, 21 days. Almost uniform, almost like a schedule. The world didn't know how to react anymore. Shock gave way to numbness. 4 interstellar probes, if they are probes, passing through the system in succession. What next? A 5th? A 10th? 100? Astronomers began a systematic search. They checked all the archives, all the survey data from recent years. They looked for faint moving objects with hyperbolic orbits. On February 14th, they found 2 more, 7I and 8II, both very dim, 20th magnitude, barely visible even to powerful telescopes. Trajectories, same story. Interstellar, speeds of about 60 kilometers per second. Direction, Sagittarius, 6 objects. On February 15th, they found the 9th. On the 16th, the 10th and 11th. On the 17th, 3 more. By February 18th, 2026, the day before the 5A's perihelion, astronomers had identified 18 interstellar objects moving in coordination through the solar system. 18, not random wanderers. A fleet, an armada, an expedition. Some objects were larger, up to 1 kilometer in diameter. Others were smaller, 1 to 200 meters. All had similar trajectories. All came from the same region. All moved in sync. The perihelia were distributed from January to May 2026, almost evenly. 1 object every week or 2, like waves, like a sequence. NASA could no longer reassure the public. The agency's director spoke again. His face was tired. His voice was tense. He said, "We are witnessing an event of unprecedented scale. 18 interstellar objects have been identified so far. There may be more that have not yet been discovered. All demonstrate coordinated movement. We can no longer deny that this is not a coincidence. This is not a natural phenomenon. This is an organized mission. The origin, goals, and intentions of the creators of these objects are unknown. We call for calm, for unity, for a rational approach. We are not alone in the universe. Now we know this. How we respond to this knowledge will determine the future of our species." Humanity held its breath. On February 19, 2026, at 9:12 a.m., Coordinated Universal Time, 5AI reached its perihelion. All eyes were on it. All telescopes were pointed at it. All radio antennas were listening. What would happen? Would it speak, like 3I? Would it flare, like 4AI? Or something new? The brightness increased. The coma expanded. Normal. And then, 17 minutes after perihelion, all 18 objects simultaneously emitted radio signals. All of them. At the same moment, on the same frequency. 1 whole 4 gigahertz. The signals lasted 90 seconds. Then they stopped. The synchronization was absolute. The temporal resolution of the radio telescopes showed that the signals began within 1 second of each other, despite the fact that the objects were millions of kilometers apart. Despite the fact that light takes time to travel, synchronization would have been impossible without prior coordination. The teams began analyzing the signals. 90 seconds, 18 sources, a huge amount of data, and there was a pattern in the data, not random noise, structure, modulation, information. On February 20th, after a night of analysis, the SETI Institute released a statement. The signals contain structured information. The pattern does not correspond to known natural processes. We have discovered repeating sequences, mathematical progressions, and what appears to be an attempt at communication. Decryption is ongoing. But we can say with certainty, this is a message. They are talking to us. And for the first time in history, we are listening. Deciphering began immediately. Teams around the world worked in parallel. SETI in the US, the European Space Agency, the Chinese Academy of Sciences, Roscosmos, private groups of cryptographers, mathematicians, linguists. Everyone analyzed the same 90 seconds of data. The signals were digital, binary modulation, ones and zeros encoded in changes in the amplitude of radio waves. It was a universal language, mathematics. Any technological civilization understands binary code. It is the basis of computation, the basis of information. The first results came in 12 hours later. The team at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology discovered the structure. The signal consisted of blocks. Each block began with the same sequence, a marker. Then the data followed. Then another marker, the end of the block. A total of 327 blocks were counted in the 90-second transmission. 327, a prime number. Not by accident. Prime numbers are a universal sign of intelligent origin. Nature does not count in prime numbers. The data varied within each block. The blocks were of different lengths. Some were short, only a few bits. Others were long, thousands of bits. But the structure was repeated. Marker, data, marker. What did the data mean? The teams tried to interpret it. They considered various encoding schemes. Numbers, images, text. On February 23rd, the team in Germany made a breakthrough. They discovered that if they took the data from the blocks and arranged it in a two-dimensional array, a grid, certain sizes created recognizable patterns. Images. The first image was simple, a circle. More precisely, a pixel representation of a circle in a 128 by 128 matrix. Black and white. Ones are white pixels, zeros are black. A circle in the center. Simple, universal. Test. Can you decode images? The second image was more complex. A spiral, a galactic spiral, two arms extending from the center, a familiar shape. It could have been any spiral galaxy, or specifically, the Milky Way. The third image showed a point in one of the spiral arms, a marker. You are here. The fourth image showed another point in the same arm, further from the center of the galaxy. The distance from the first point was not indicated by scale, but the position was clear. We are there. They indicated their origin, the region of the galaxy. Not a specific star, the resolution was insufficient, but a general area, the outer arm of the Milky Way, thousands of light years from Earth. The next images were mathematical, diagrams, graphs. One showed a sine wave, another showed an exponential curve, a third showed something like a spectrum, lines at specific frequencies, perhaps spectral lines of elements, hydrogen, helium, carbon, oxygen, the chemistry of life. Then an image that made the teams stop, a figure, not human, not detailed, abstract, a round body, several protrusions, perhaps limbs, difficult to interpret, but the intention was clear. This is us, this is our form, not an attempt to show accurate biology, just a signal. We are different from you. We don't assume you look like this. This is for reference. The remaining blocks contained data that the teams could not immediately decode. Numerical sequences, perhaps coordinates, perhaps timestamps, perhaps something requiring context that humanity did not have. But the main message was understood. We came from a distant region of the galaxy. We know mathematics. We know chemistry. We have a form different from yours. We are here. We are watching. On February 22, SETI held a global press conference. It was broadcast in all languages. The audience, the whole world. The director of SETI presented the results of the decryption. He showed images. He explained the interpretation. His voice was calm, but his words carried the weight of history. He said, "For the first time in human history, we have received a message from another intelligence. The message is structured. It is understandable in its basic form. They are saying, we exist, we are intelligent, we are capable of interstellar travel. We have come to you. This is not a threat. This is not an invasion. This is an introduction. This is the first handshake across the abyss of space." The journalist asked, "What do they want?" The director replied, "We don't know. The message contains no requests. It contains no threats. It contains no instructions. Only information. Perhaps the next stage of contact depends on our response. Perhaps they are waiting. Perhaps they are simply observing, gathering data about us as we gather about them." Another journalist asked, "Does humanity plan to respond?" The director looked at his colleagues on stage. The UN representative took the microphone. She said, "An international consortium is being formed to coordinate a possible response. Any message sent on behalf of Earth must represent all of humanity, not just one nation or culture. This takes time, consultation, agreement. We are moving as quickly as possible, but we must do this correctly. Humanity's first impression in the cosmic arena cannot be ruined." Third reporter, "How long will the objects remain in the solar system?" The astronomer on stage replied, "The trajectories have been calculated. All 18 objects will leave the inner solar system by the end of May 2026. They will pass their perihelion, be turned around by the sun's gravity, and accelerate back into interstellar space. We have a few months of opportunity for observation and potential communication. After that, they will become too distant and dim for detailed study. A few months. Humanity has been given a few months to understand the most important event in its history. On February 24th, governments began discussing a response. What to say, how to represent humanity, what information to send. The suggestions varied. Some scientists proposed a mathematical message, prime numbers, Pythagoras' theorem, the constants of physics, the universal language of science. Others proposed a cultural presentation, images of Earth, music, art, show the diversity of human civilization, show beauty, not just technology. Others suggested caution, not to send anything that could be used against us, not to reveal military capabilities, not to show vulnerability, to present strength and unity. The debate was intense. Every country had an opinion. Every culture wanted to be represented. Consensus was difficult, but while the politicians argued, the scientists continued to observe. On February 28th, 4A reached its perihelion. Was this the second time for this object? No. 4A had already passed its perihelion on January 28th. It was another object from the fleet that had reached its perihelion. Confusion in the designations was inevitable. 18 objects, many discovered simultaneously, had overlapping temporary names. NASA began a systematic renumbering. 3A Atlas retained its name, the first to be discovered. The rest were given sequential designations, 3A2, 3A3, and so on up to 3A18. Each object reaching perihelion showed increased activity, cometary behavior. Brightness increased, the coma expanded, normal, but no additional radio signals after the synchronous transmission on February 19th. Silence, as if they had said their piece and were now waiting. On March 5th, astronomers noticed a change in the trajectory of 3A Atlas. Small, but definite. Non-gravitational acceleration increased. The object deviated from its predicted path more than expected from standard degassing. The direction of acceleration had changed. Previously, it had been radial, away from the sun. Now there was a tangential component along the orbit. The object was accelerating not only outward, but also along its path, as if it were correcting its trajectory. By March 8th, 7 other objects had shown similar maneuvers, small adjustments, changes in speed of fractions of a percent, but enough to change their final trajectories. Astronomers calculated the new paths and discovered a pattern. The objects were adjusting their trajectories so that their exit paths from the solar system were not random. They were aligning themselves, aiming at a specific point in the celestial sphere, a region in the constellation Cygnus, a direction different from where they came from. What is in Cygnus? Many stars. One of them is Kepler 442b, an exoplanet in the habitable zone, discovered by the Kepler telescope in 2015. Distance, 1,200 light-years. Coincidence? Or the next stop? On March 9th, an international consortium announced its decision. Humanity will send a reply. The message will be transmitted on March 21st, 2026. The equinox, a symbolic date. The day when light and darkness are equal. The day of balance. The content of the message was the result of a compromise. Mathematical foundations, images of Earth, the planet, continents, oceans, the spectrum of sunlight, our star, images of humans, men and women, a variety of races, symbols of peace, an olive branch, a dove, music, short fragments from different cultures, Bach, Mozart, Indian raga, African drums, Chinese opera, a total of 7 minutes of audio. The message will be transmitted on the same frequency that the objects transmitted on, 1 whole gigahertz, at the maximum power available to Earth's radio telescopes. Direction: all 18 objects simultaneously. Several telescopes around the world are coordinating the transmission. The world waited for March 21st with anticipation and anxiety. On March 16th, an event occurred that added a new level of urgency. Astronomers discovered a 19th object, not in archived data, in real time, a new discovery. 3A19, trajectory, same story, interstellar, Speed about 60 kilometers per second. Direction, Sagittarius. But this object was bigger, much bigger. Estimated size, 2 kilometers in diameter. 2 kilometers. It's not a comet, it's an asteroid, or something else. The brightness corresponded to the size. The object was visible as a point of 13th magnitude, bright enough for amateur telescopes. Perigee was predicted for April 23, 2026. Spectroscopy began immediately. The composition differed from previous objects. Less ice, more rock, silicates, metals, iron, nickel. A composition similar to the asteroids of the main belt of the solar system, but coming from interstellar space. Why was this object different? Why was it larger and rockier? Theories multiplied. Maybe it's a command ship, a mother object controlling the others. Maybe it's a transport vehicle, and the others are shuttles or probes. Maybe it's just a different class of objects with different functions. Or, as some whispered, maybe it wasn't an empty asteroid. Maybe there was something inside. On March 18th, radio telescopes began monitoring 3A19. They searched for signals. Any activity. Nothing. Silence. The object moved quietly through space, approaching the sun. On March 20th, the day before humanity's planned transmission, something unexpected happened. All 18 smaller objects simultaneously changed brightness, not a flash, a darkening. The brightness of each fell to 0.6, 0.8 stellar magnitude. This is a significant decrease, as if part of the reflective surface had disappeared. Astronomers tried to understand. What could have caused the synchronous dimming? Dust clouds suddenly surrounding the objects? A change in orientation, showing darker sides? Or was something unfolded? A structure covering part of the surface? High-resolution images were obtained by the James Webb Space Telescope. Focus on Tria Atlas, the closest and brightest. The images showed that a structure had appeared around the object. Not a cloud of gas. A solid structure, geometric. It looked like a disk or ring surrounding the object. The size of the ring, several kilometers in diameter, much larger than the object itself. The ring was thin, barely visible. It reflected very little light, but its presence was undeniable. What was it? A solar sail? An antenna? A shield? A sensor array? Spectroscopy of the ring showed that the material was not ice, not stone. The spectrum was strange, flat. It hardly reflected light in the visible range. In the infrared, it showed weak radiation consistent with the temperature of the surrounding space. A material optimized for minimal reflection, stealth technology, or a material optimized for interaction with electromagnetic waves, an antenna for receiving or transmitting. On March 21, 2026, at 12 Mao UTC, exactly at noon, Greenwich Mean Time, a symbolic moment, humanity transmitted its message. Radio telescopes in Arecibo is destroyed, VLA in the USA, Effelsberg in Germany, Park in Australia. Everyone coordinated. The transmission was carried out simultaneously on all frequencies concentrated around 1.4 gigahertz. 7 minutes. Mathematics, images, music, the representation of humanity. The world stood still. Billions of people watched the broadcast. They knew that at that moment, the message was flying at the speed of light through space toward the objects. The delay time depended on the distance to each object. The closest was 3A Atlas, currently about 300 million kilometers away. It takes light about 16 minutes to travel that distance. That means the object will receive the message 16 minutes after the transmission begins. If they decide to respond immediately, the reply will arrive 32 minutes after the start. 32 minutes. Humanity waited. 12 hours and 32 minutes. Nothing. 12 hours and 35 minutes. Nothing. 13 hours. Still silence. Maybe they don't respond immediately. Maybe they need time to process the message, to understand it, to formulate a response. The hours passed. Radio telescopes listened. Optical telescopes observed the objects. They looked for changes. Any signs of a response? Nothing. The objects continued to move along their trajectories. The rings remained deployed. No new signals. No changes in behavior. By the end of the day, the disappointment was palpable. We sent our best presentation. They ignored it. Or maybe they're just watching, gathering information, not interacting directly. On March 22nd, astronomers noticed that the rings around the objects had begun to rotate. Slowly. The rotation period was about 2 hours, independent of the rotation of the objects themselves. It was as if the rings were separate structures, freely rotating around the central nuclei. On March 24th, something happened that gave hope. One of the objects, 3A7, emitted a short radio signal, 5 seconds. Frequency, 1.4 gigahertz, the same as always. The signal was simple, a repeating sequence, short pulses in rhythm, beep beep beep, pause, beep beep beep, pause. The teams analyzed it. The sequence contained 21 pulses, another simple number. But what did it mean? Someone suggested it was confirmation. They had received our message. They were responding symbolically. 21 was no coincidence. March 21st, the day of transmission. The interpretation was debatable, but it was something, a sign that they were listening. The other objects remained silent. On April 1st, astronomers detected a change in the trajectory of 3A19, a large rocky object. It began to slow down. Non-gravitational acceleration directed against its motion. The object was slowing down. Calculations showed that if the deceleration continued, the object would not reach perihelion on April 23rd, as predicted. It would slow down so much that its orbit would change. It could remain in the solar system, not pass by. Stay. The reports caused panic. They're staying? One of the objects is staying? Why? NASA has released a statement. We are observing a change in the trajectory of object 3A19. If deceleration continues, the object may be captured by the sun's gravity and remain in orbital resonance. The reason for the change in trajectory is unknown. We are continuing to monitor the situation. There are no signs of a threat to Earth. The trajectory does not intersect our planet's orbit. There is no threat. But the fear remained. What if they decide to stay? An observation station? An outpost? Colonization? On April 10th, deceleration continued. 3A19 slowly slowed down. The trajectory was adjusted. New calculations showed that the object would enter an elliptical orbit around the Sun. The perihelion would be about 2 astronomical units. The aphelion, the farthest point, would be about 5 astronomical units. The orbit would be between Mars and Jupiter. The orbital period would be approximately 4 years, a permanent resident of the solar system. On April 15th, the remaining 18 smaller objects began to accelerate. Not to slow down, to accelerate, to leave the system faster than predicted, as if they were in a hurry. The rings around them began to glow, faintly, in the infrared range, as if they were heating up or generating energy. On April 20th, 3A Atlas and 4 other objects closest to the exit from the system emitted a final radio signal. Simultaneously, it lasted 30 seconds. Frequency, 1.4 gigahertz. The signal contained an image. One image, decoded in hours. The image showed 2 points, one marked with a symbol, a circle with a dot in the center, the astronomical symbol for the Sun, our system. The second dot, at a distance, was marked with another symbol, a circle with a cross, an unknown symbol, but the position of the second dot corresponded to the direction of the constellation Cygnus, the direction the objects were aiming for with their exit trajectories. The message was clear. We are going there, from you to the next place. And below the image was a sequence of numbers. The teams decoded them. The numbers represented coordinates, right ascension and declination, the exact position on the celestial sphere. Astronomers checked the coordinates. Star, Kepler 442, exoplanet in the habitable zone, distance 1,200 light-years. They told us where they were going. On April 23, 2026, 3A19 reached its new orbit. Deceleration ceased. The object stabilized on an elliptical trajectory, a constant orbit around the Sun. It stayed. The remaining 18 objects were far beyond the orbit of Mars. They were accelerating outward. By the end of May, they would leave the inner system. By the end of the year, they would become too dim to observe. On May 10th, the last object in the group passed Jupiter's orbit. The radio signals stopped. The rings went out. The objects became just faint points of light receding into infinity. But one remained. 3A19, 2 kilometers in diameter, stone and metal, rotating in orbit between Mars and Jupiter. NASA announced that the object would be monitored continuously. Future missions are planned for close study, perhaps a manned expedition in the next decade. Humanity has been given the opportunity to study alien technology at a distance accessible to spacecraft. On June 1, 2026, spectroscopy of 3A19 showed a change. New spectral lines appeared on the surface of the object. Emission, weak but definite. The lines corresponded to ionized gases, argon, xenon, heavy inert gases, engines, reaction product emissions, or ventilation, atmosphere released from inside. No one knew, but the object was active, not a dead rock. Something inside was working. On June 15th, radio telescopes picked up a faint signal from 3A19. Narrowband. Frequency, 1.4 GHz, continuous, unmodulated. Just a tone, a beacon. The signal was directional, a beam of radio waves emitted in a specific direction, not toward Earth, toward the outer solar system, toward the 18 departing objects. Communication. It maintains communication with the others. A relay, an outpost, watching them, or us. On July 1, 2026, exactly 1 year after the first discovery of 3A Atlas, humanity celebrated the anniversary, the year that changed everything. A year ago, we discovered an interstellar comet. Unusual but not impossible. Today we know we are not alone. Other minds exist. They travel between the stars. They watch us. They left an outpost in our system. Questions remain. Who are they? What do they want? Why did they come? Will the rest return? What is the object remaining in orbit doing? There are no answers. But now we know what to look for. We know that interstellar visitors are not accidental. We know that intelligent life is common enough to reach other star systems. We know that we are part of a larger story, a story that stretches across the galaxy, a story that is just beginning for us. 3A19 remains, a silent sentinel, a stone eye watching our system. Every night, astronomers point their telescopes at it. They measure, they analyze, they wait for changes. And in deep space, 18 objects continue their journey. In years, they will pass through the Oort cloud. In decades, they will leave the sun's influence. In centuries, they will approach the next star system, Kepler 442, 1,200 light-years from here. If they travel at a speed of 60 kilometers per second, the journey will take 20 million years. Maybe they will accelerate. Maybe they will reach relativistic speeds, a significant fraction of the speed of light. Maybe they will arrive in tens of thousands of years instead of millions. Maybe the planet around Kepler 442 will receive visitors, like we did. Maybe the intelligent beings there will discover strange objects entering their system. Maybe they will decipher the message. Maybe they will understand we are not alone. And maybe someday, if humanity survives, if we develop the technology for interstellar travel, we will follow them. We will send our probes, our messengers. We will become those who visit other worlds, who leave outposts, who whisper across the void, "We are here, we exist, you are not alone." The universe continues to send letters, space postcards, messages in bottles thrown across the ocean of time and space. And every time one arrives, we are reminded, we live in a vast, ancient, amazing cosmos. A cosmos full of mysteries, full of wonders, full of other minds looking at the stars and asking the same questions we do. Are we alone? Now we know the answer. No. And that knowledge has changed us forever. It has changed how we see ourselves. It has changed how we see our planet. It has changed how we see the future. 3I-19 remains in orbit, waiting, watching, a beacon in the darkness, a reminder of what has happened, a promise of what is yet to come. And humanity looks up at the sky and knows we are no longer alone. We were never alone. We just didn't know it. Now we know. And the question is no longer whether others exist. The question is, what will we do with this knowledge? How will we change? Where will we go from here? The answers lie ahead, in the stars, in the future, in the next messages that may come, or in those we send. The story is just beginning, and we are part of it, forever.